Hi guys, so the pro-Brexit website, ironically called Brexit Facts, run by the Campaign for an Independent Britain, interviewed arch-Brexiteer Jacob Rees-Mogg about how well things are going since the UK left the EU. Now, right from the start, the Tory MP and former Business Secretary is either misleading the viewers or actually ignorant of reality. He says things that someone who has been involved in the Brexit debate for so long must understand are falsehoods, which begs the question, why is he continuing down this road? Anyway, let's jump in and hear what he had to say.
How do you think that Brexit is going?
I'm very positive about Brexit for a number of reasons. First of all, and most importantly, we are now in charge of our own destiny. So democracy has won that you can change your government and the government can change your laws. That was.
Are you suggesting that the UK could never change its government or change its laws since the mid-1970s?
Always the biggest benefit of Brexit. It's then up to governments how they use it. But if you look at more specific things, well, we got the vaccine earlier than anybody else.
I have to keep bringing up this clip.
We have been able to authorise the supply of this vaccine using provisions under European law which exist until the 1st of January. So our speed or our progress has been totally dependent on the availability of data in our rolling review and the rigorous assessment and independent advice we have received. So I hope that clarifies the point about the European relationship.
Yes, it clarifies it for most reasonable people. It doesn't seem to clarify it for Jacob Rees-Mogg, which begs the question, is Jacob Rees-Mogg lying here? Because obviously he knows what happened. He knows that the UK was a member of the European. It was still within the transition period. It was still relying on EU legislation. It didn't need to leave in order to roll out the vaccine, as was pointed out there. So why is Jacob Rees-Mogg continuing with this falsehood?
And that was because we didn't sign up to the slow, cumbersome European way of doing things. Still on COVID, we've saved £191 billion by not being part of the EU's COVID recovery scheme. So that's really important. I mean, that is a huge amount of money, even in terms of our relatively bloated deficit, that we wouldn't have had control over how it was spent.
Once again, he's telling lies. So, but why was the idea of having a recovery fund a bad idea? And the EU member states that received this money could spend it as they wish. There were, of course, with certain restrictions, but they were able to pretty much spend it as they wanted. So how is it a case of this was a bad... Imagine being part of the EU. They had this massive fund that we would have to contribute to, of course, but we get something back.
So two major things before you get on to the Financial Services Reform. The Financial Services Reform Bill is now almost through the House of Lords. Will help make.
So this is all they have, financial services. So businesses who were told that things would get better if they voted for Brexit and then didn't get better. The UK government imposed economic sanctions upon Britain. People were convinced to vote to impose barriers to trade upon Britain, to make the country worse off, to make it more difficult for the likes of the NHS to get access to the workers they need. And on that side of the scale, you have that. And on the other side, you have financial services.
Make the City of London competitive again, dealing with issues like Solvency II, boosting economic growth. And that's before you get on to the free trade deals, the signing up to the Pacific trade deal, which takes us into the biggest growth market in the world.
Now, once again, I don't know if Jacob Rees-Mogg is lying or he's pretending to be, or if he's pretending to be ignorant or he's actually ignorant. Because he used to be the business secretary, so he should know that most countries do most of their trade with their neighbours. So it doesn't make economic sense for the UK to abandon Europe and focus on countries on the other side of the planet. Like, you don't need to be the business secretary to understand that. Most reasonable people, if it's presented to them, say, oh yeah, that makes sense. You trade with your neighbours mainly. The US trades mainly with Canada, with Mexico. The UK trades mainly with France, with Germany, with the Netherlands, with its European neighbours. But for some reason, this is wrong. This is not true. The UK should be trading more with Australia or New Zealand or Japan.
Now, looking at the withdrawal agreement, and you mentioned the Edinburgh reforms, which was an area, of course, where we didn't have a deal with the EU. Do you think that a future government should relook at that withdrawal agreement and potentially seek to get rid of it altogether?
I don't think she understands what the withdrawal agreement is.
I don't think we want to spend our whole life fretting about the European Union. We need to be looking at the broader horizon. That's why the Trans-Pacific Agreement is so important. The deal with Australia and New Zealand is so important. Why should we spend all our mental energy on the EU when there is a larger, faster growing world?
Because once again, you do most of your trade with your neighbours, Jacob. You obviously know that. So you're lying to these people.
Economy outside the EU. So there may in future be tweaks that we will want to do, but I wouldn't make that the focus of policy.
In terms of an ambitious post-Brexit industrial strategy, what sort of things should politicians be looking into doing, using the powers that Brexit delivered?
It's important to understand that governments don't make the best investors.
What? When governments generally invest, for example, in infrastructure, this has a return on investment threefold. Now, it depends on the type of infrastructure, it depends on the type of investment. But generally, if the government build an airport, for example, this increased investment, it attracts small businesses who want to be close to the airport for importing, exporting, for courier service, whatever, for tourism, whatever. So when the government actually invests well, there's a massive return on investment. But if you're a small government Tory, then you think the opposite is true.
What governments can do is create the right circumstances for investment. And that, I think, will be free ports. And
she was asking you about Brexit benefits, and you're talking about free ports. Free ports were introduced when the UK was a member of the European Community. They were ended by David Cameron in 2012, when the UK was a member of the European Union. So free ports have nothing to do with Brexit. But if you want to get into free ports, the European Union is cracking down on them because they're hives of corruption. But then maybe corruption isn't a bad thing for the Tories.
Enterprise zones where not only do you perhaps have some tax benefits, rates benefits, but you also reduce the bureaucracy. Planning is one of the areas where the EU caused the longest delays through all its habitats directives.
You have a Brexiteer talking about reducing paperwork, reducing bureaucracy, when he campaigned for more bureaucracy. British businesses are now suffering more red tape because of Brexit. Has Jacob Rees-Mogg turned around and apologised for that? Did he say, I'm sorry, I actually was mistaken. When I told you that there would be less bureaucracy when we left the European Union, I was wrong. I'm sorry about that. Let me try and make amends. No.
Nutrients directives, all of these laws, actually nutrients was an ECJ ruling, I think, but it nonetheless stopped development happening. And we need to have areas where things can happen quickly, because that's essential to economic growth. But
quickly or correctly, like the Brexit trade deals, the post-Brexit trade deals, do we want it done right, or do we want it done quickly?
I think the government can say we should build cars here and we should build aeroplanes here in the 1970s. No, that won't work.
Are you concerned that there are people out there who wish to draw us back into, at the very least, a sort of regulatory orbit of the EU?
I think the fascinating thing about Brexit was that the Remainers didn't start campaigning until after they'd lost. So they never really thought they were going to lose, and they were so shocked and so angry that they have then started campaigning.
To a certain extent, he's correct, because people didn't actually think anyone would be stupid enough to impose economic sanctions upon themselves. Now, nobody outside the Brexiteer And when I'm talking about Brexiteers, I'm talking about the leaders, the Nigel Farages, the Jacob Rees-Moggs, the Boris Johnsons. They probably knew it was a bad idea, but they didn't care because they believed that, well, they'll benefit some way out of this. The public, the country will suffer, but we'll be okay. We may actually make a few quid. But the Remain side actually thought, well, nobody's going to impose sanctions. Like, if we leave the European Union, what's going to happen then? They were not very good at convincing people, obviously. But yes, to a certain extent, he was right. The campaigning began after the vote.
To try and make us still part of the European ambit. It's why they've blocked so many of the reforms that we've tried to bring through.
Sorry, who has blocked? You have an 80-seat majority in the House of Commons, or whatever it is now. You can't blame Remainers for stopping Brexit. Brexit happened. You can't blame Remainers for you not being able to succeed with Brexit. You had a majority. You still have a majority.
Through, whether that's the retained EU law bill or their opposition to some free trade deals, because they want us to be tied into the EU. There are definitely people who think that the EU is still the future of the country. They know they can't do it openly. They can't win a referendum to get us back in. So they would like to do it by more regulatory alignment.
Why would going back into the EU not be a good option?
Well, going back into the EU, under the EU's own treaties, would require us to adopt Schengen, and it would require...
No. Why are you lying once again? Why would the UK not have to join Schengen? Because Ireland is not part of Schengen. Now, once again, I don't know if Jacob Rees-Mogg... See, this is very difficult for me because these are simple things that a Tory politician should know. A former member of cabinet should know. But he's acting as if he doesn't know these things. Which is very worrying, either if he knows and he's lying or he doesn't know and he's telling the truth. But when it comes to Schengen, for example, the Republic of Ireland is not part of Schengen. But Ireland and Britain have the common travel area. So if Britain was forced into Schengen, Ireland would have to be part of Schengen too. But I don't see that happening. So Schengen wouldn't be a requirement.
Requires to adopt the euro.
Okay, about the euro, we've talked about this before. Yes, the UK would be required to adopt the euro. Would it actually adopt the euro? Probably not.
But it would also mean paying into the European Union's budget without the rebate that we had whilst we were a member beforehand.
No, we don't. We can't determine a lot of things because there are no negotiations at the moment. So the European Union today will be very different to the European Union when the UK eventually starts the negotiations to join. And we can't predict anything. Jacob Rees-Mogg can try and make his predictions, but they were as useful as his predictions before 2016, based on nothing. So he can say, well, we'd have to do this or we'd have to do that. In some cases, yes, but we can't make predictions about what the UK would have to pay or if it would have to pay or what.
So it would cost us more. It would bind us into economically unattractive options. It would...
Such as?
would invalidate all our free trade deals that we've been negotiating.
Those wonderful trade deals that add 0.04. No, I'm wrong. It's actually 0.08. It was upgraded or downgraded recently. That's what CPTPP is going to add. The Australian trade deal, the New Zealand trade deal are terrible for UK farming. If you don't believe me, ask the farmers. So would they be sad to see those trade deals disappear? Not very much.
Since we left, and the democratic deficit would be reintroduced. So
what democratic deficit?
Would be an act of self-harm to go back into the European Union.
He likes to use these terms. He was talking recently, or I think it was last September. He was talking about how imposing checks on the border would be economic harm. Implementing Brexit on the border would be economic harm. Now he's saying rejoining the European Union would be economic harm. So which is it, Jacob? Is it implementing Brexit is economic harm or rejoining the EU is?
Do you think it'd be fair to say that there have been some teething problems since we've left the EU?
Inevitably, with any major constitutional change, there will be some issues. The relationship between GB and Northern Ireland, Great Britain and Northern Ireland, is not working as it should, and we should have been bolder in dealing with those problems.
Bolder? We should have banged our fist on the table more. I remember back in 2020, I think it was, or in 2019, there were talk about how, you know, the UK government needs to be tougher with the European Union. Bang your fist on the table. That's how you negotiate. Boris should have gone there and negotiated instead of sending David Davis or David Frost.
We should always have said to the European Union, we're not going to put a border in Ireland. You put one in if you like. We should.
Is he really this stupid? Is he really this dumb? To say that, well, we're not going to put a border, you can put a border on the island of Ireland. Does he not understand the Good Friday Agreement? Does he not understand that the EU and the Republic of Ireland didn't want Brexit? The people of Northern Ireland didn't want Brexit. They voted against it. But the EU and the Republic of Ireland didn't have a vote. They said, look, if you can leave, but you need to clean up your mess before you leave. And your mess will be the situation in Northern Ireland. We told you it would be a bad idea to leave. You said, we don't give a shit. We're going. The Brexiteers I'm talking about. And now Jacob Rees-Mogg, after all this time, is turning around and saying, well, we could have, you know, if they wanted to put up a border, that was their choice. I'm really struggling to finish this video because it's so frustrating. It's so absurd that you have somebody, a Tory MP, a former business secretary, coming out with this crap.
Should not have tied ourselves in to protecting the single market. That's their business, not ours.
What do you think Brexit's Britain will look like in 10 years' time?
Well, it will depend on choices made by voters. You see, the thing that Conservatives should remember is that leaving the European Union means that voters could decide to take Jeremy Corbyn's approach to the economy. And if they do that, I don't think it'd be very successful.
What are you talking about? They could have taken Jeremy Corbyn's approach to the economy. But there was a vote in 2019, and the people didn't vote for Jeremy Corbyn. They voted for Boris Johnson. Does this guy, once again, he said it before, now we can change our government. But you could change your government. You've changed your government over the last number of years, the last number of decades. Since the UK joined in the 1970s, it's changed its government, I don't know how many times. Changed its party, not so much, but changed governments on a regular basis, every 4 or 5 years, with a few exceptions. What the hell is he talking about? Does he honestly believe that countries like Germany, Italy, France, the Netherlands, Spain, their governments don't change? That their laws don't change? You understand that when the EU introduces a law, it is then applied in the parliament of the representative state. But sometimes they don't enforce those laws. That's the difference. In many cases, there are laws that are not enforced in Parliament. Parliament creates laws, but they're not enforced. The police don't have the resources, or they just turn a blind eye. But once again, I really don't understand what Jacob Rees-Mogg is trying to get at here. He's been saying, since the beginning, a whole load of crap. He has no evidence to back it up. And I have punched holes in it really easily, because it's really simple stuff. You know, once again, this is not some guy pulled off the street who's been asked, what are the Brexit benefits? You voted for it. What are the benefits? And they try and pull something out of their behind. This is a guy who was on the campaign to leave the European Union, who's done, I don't know, thousands of interviews probably about Brexit, and he's still coming up with the same old crap. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.